And welcome once again to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast. Each week, we two guys, a record store owner and a record collector. I suppose I should let you introduce yourself in that fashion first. Get together and talk about records. If you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. My name is Jim. I own a record store, but I'm also a collector. A tricky one today.
And I'm Steve, and I'm just a record collector. So
but you could own a store. In fact, you could have been a greeter here, but
well, it was kind of my dream job there. I get paid in vinyl. What more could I ask for?
There you go. You hit another record store by the looks of your channel this past week, didn't you? You found another one. I'm going to get a little bit of a heartbreak every time I hear you say my new local store is just around the corner.
Yeah. We were out traveling and I went in there, and it was kind of funny actually. Someone that has another channel asked, "Are you Steve Carlson?" And I go, "I am." And so my wife's going, "What the hell?"
Can't take you anywhere.
Yeah, so it was nice, but you'll find out exactly what I bought this week. So you'll see.
Okay. So as we do each week, we're going to get to our pickups, and we've got a very interesting and somewhat difficult subject to realize today, at least for me. We'll get to that here in a couple minutes. Before we do our pickups, though, Steve, can I share something that came into the store that I found rather in the store here?
Yeah.
Earlier this week, you've heard me talk, and I think I've done some stuff on my channel before about strange things found inside of record albums, old record albums. I mean, yes, you find pot seeds, but I found report cards and like detention slips and love letters. And oftentimes, too, I'll find newspaper clippings. Usually it's a clipping. I had a Gordon Lightfoot record, The Summertime Dream, that had this really neat news clipping article about the Edmund Fitzgerald and the song after that happened. And, we'll see cartoons and stuff. But this time I was going through some really old Beatles albums and some beat up Beatles albums when I found not just a newspaper clipping, but an entire section of a newspaper in one of the Beatles albums. What's even cooler is that this is from February 9th of 1964. Wow. And it is an opinion section, the opinion section. So it's section B of the Detroit Free Press from that date. And the entire front page of section B is dedicated to the Beatles and their brand new phenomenon. This thing is actually it's a tremendous snapshot of history. I mean, quite literally, you see the time and date when the Beatles were just, hey, here's this new group from Britain that is sweeping the nation. These guys are all the rage. I think the subhead says the newest teenage rages are four Britons with hair in their eyes who stomp up a screaming storm. And then it's got pictures. It talks a little bit about the Beatles and their takeover showing up in the U.S. from '64. There's an entire article about the Beatles haircut fad sweeping the nation and how they talk with several women in the Detroit area and whether or not they're going to get their haircut in a mock Beatles haircut. But what is tremendously interesting on this, be kind of careful because I think I'm going to end up framing this, is below the fold of the section are four little mini interview. Obviously, this is just kind of a PR thing that they did, I'm sure, through the label, but it's a little quick interview bites with each of the members of the Beatles. George Harrison's up there first, and he talks a little politics, and he talks about women. If there's a nice bird you fancy, you forget all about the others, don't you? That's a precursor to the whole Eric Clapton thing. Holy cow. I think about that. The Ringo interview subhead is, I'd like to end up sort of unforgettable. So it sounds like he was a little insecure at the point there. The quote from Ringo, I don't fancy being a bus conductor. I'd like to be sort of comfortable with a nice house and a few hairdressing businesses. That's a good game. I suppose I'd end up unforgettable. Again, it's really bizarre. Now, Paul McCartney it's very interesting quote from Paul in here where he talks about politics. He goes, you're joking. I don't like the history at school, and it's the same with politics. He gets further, said, I don't feel I have to be religious. I may need it as I grow older to comfort me when I'm dying. But as for now, as far as I'm concerned, I can rot. So that is in there. But the most telling thing, and I'll say this one for last year. Let me call this up again. 1964, in case you're curious, this is a write-up from the Detroit Free Press. The John Lennon quote, he talks about grammar school, and I'm going to start using this slang. At grammar school, I tried to look like a Ted. You're not a Ted, they would say. Teds work at factories. Have you ever heard people referred to as Teds? That's kind of a square or something like that. But the telling quote from John Lennon in here, he talks about God. He says, perhaps I was worried more when I was working it out about God. I used him like everybody else for things I wanted. God gave me a guitar, I would say. I get spasms of being intellectual. I read a bit about politics. I don't think I'd vote for anyone. No messages from any of those phony politicians are coming through me. And then here's the last quote from John Lennon in the article. It says, the only thing I'm afraid of is growing old. I hate that. They get old and they've missed it somehow. Then the old always resent the young and vice versa. So the head quote is, the only thing I'm afraid of is getting old.
Those are kind of, you wouldn't expect that deep to get into religion or anything like that, especially back, you think in 64. I mean,
oh yeah.
Everyone was pretty sure the world was going to go to hell in a handbasket because of the Beatles, and then came the Rolling Stones, and let's just face it, we're doomed.
Well, aside from the Beatles, the other thing I don't mention is, as I said, this is the entire section. So there is an opinion piece in here about a prayer resolution before Congress, and it talks about the communist infiltration of the United States at that point. So, and there's stocks, and there's a whole section on the, it's got a desegregation of Southern schools report running through the percentages of desegregation that's happening in the South. I think it's an amazing find. I do enjoy history and obviously music history, but this was just a really, really cool find, hidden in a record for, 50 plus years. It feels like here more so.
I want to know, were there any good sales in there?
Sadly, no. This section had all stock market prices and things of that nature, and some movie or television ads in there. But yeah, no sales. I really wanted to see, the price of milk or going gasoline price or something in there. But again, very, very cool. I'm going to get this framed and we'll hang this up in the store. It's just kind of a really neat piece of history to have, and mostly intact, a little frayed on the edges, but man, that is a cool find. So happy about that. Speaking of cool finds, sir, how'd you do this week? Nice. How did you do this week picking up some new stuff for the collection?
Well, let me share it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, there you go. See, they're invisible because I even went to a record store and I just bought a t-shirt. I went to a record store and just bought a lousy t-shirt.
That's all you got. Wow.
I did have so one thing I did get was some VCLT, which in the vinyl community means Vinyl Community Love Train. I know we've talked about this before. So there's a gentleman down in North Carolina named Kendall Stokes, and it's the Spin Doctor and the Vinyl Mayhem is his channel. And I told him you need to shorten that up, Kendall. But I met him last year when I went to North Carolina for a dig with for a bunch of people, which was very exciting. So he sent me the brand new Rival Sons, and I really like Rival Sons quite a bit. So except I used to have some of their stuff on vinyl and CD, and I haven't. So we got the brand new one here, and it's called something. I don't know. Oh, there we go. Lightbringer.
There we go.
It's that big sticker on the front. It has its name. I always look at the spine. It's not on the spine.
Look at the front. There you go.
Yeah. And then I said, this is the very first album from the Struts. And I recently had a Struts album. one of their newer ones, and I loved it. I thought, it's just kind of garage rock type feel to it. And so he saw this at a record store. He was watching a video, and the guy said, yeah, I can send that to you. So he ordered it and had this sent to me. Everybody wants the Struts. So that, and he gave me a third one. Yeah, it's Donny Osmond. I've been kind of ragging on Marie Osmond lately. So, yeah.
So now you got the balance of that.
Yeah, he did. So he saw that. And they did put a beard on him here, and they gave him facial hair. So I just have to see if I'm brave enough to play it. I will. Now, I have a good friend of mine that watches my channel all the time. May listen to the podcast. His name is TC. He has the Kirkham Report. He likes the Osmonds. I mean, he's into that pop. That's his thing, and he knows more than anybody. And so every time he goes, you're making me mad. You keep picking on Murray. I thought, well, what do you want me to do? So, hey, it's my channel, man.
I'll cue him into the store here because I've got a stack of Osmond, Donnie Marie, and Brothers this thick over in the $2 bin.
So overall, it was a quiet week in Lake Wobegon in regards to getting vinyl records. What about you, Jim?
Well, I had a fun one. I had kind of a big week for me.
Well, good. You're picking up my slack.
I'm picking up the slack. First up, I have got a Michigan band that I am totally and completely unfamiliar with. And even attempting to look them up, I'm still coming up kind of dry. This is called a group called the Potions. And let me call my notes up on this other side here. So this is from 2014. And Discogs calls this rock. The genre is rock. And the subgenre is swamp pop. I don't know as if I've ever heard of swamp pop, but it's called the Potions. Just a kind of quick little album. This is a Michigan group also, by the way, from Hamtramck. So this is what really attracted me to this, is it goes into the Michigan collection. I did give it a good listen, and I can confirm that it's swamp pop. It's not quite the Cramps. It's got that Michigan garage rock feel to it as well. But I just wish I could find more info on these guys other than they're from Hamtramck, which is, just by Detroit. My family heritage, by the way, one side of my family is from Hamtramck, way back into the 60s. So, but this, again, very interesting stuff. I hopefully can find a sample of this on Spotify so I can share that with you, and you can see if that's something that you dig as well. But the Potions, and this is according to Discogs, from what I can see, there's zero info on them. This is their only album, and they only have 2 other singles and EPs under their belt, and that is it. So,
I got to tell you, those Spotify playlists that you put up are excellent. They're really nice. You just pop them in and just enjoy. I mean, they're really
fun.
Really
they're fun. Yeah. You can listen all the way through to what we ramble about. If you don't want to listen to us talk, listen to the music that we talk about at the very least.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure this one is going to be on there. This, I saw an article that called this the greatest album you've never heard or heard of. And this is a group called The Thought. And I just love the cover on this. This is a self-titled The Thought. And this one is from 1985. Discogs calls it alternative pop, pop rock, psychedelic rock. Now, this is British. Actually, not British. I'm sorry. The Thought. I've really got to get this correct. They're a Dutch band, formerly known as the Rousers. And they kind of took the route of almost like being a cross between the Damned and the Cure, or any of the more popular stuff like a Psychedelic Furs. They've got a synth, an 80s synth pop sound, but it's tinged with psychedelic rock. And it's a very interesting mix. I really, really dig it. I was actually found this because I had been looking for different cover tunes, and they do a cover of the Byrds' 8 Miles High on this. And so from finding that song and really getting a kick out of it, I looked for the rest of the album, found the album, and just think that the album is great, but it's really hard to peg because it's that in-between ground of not quite British pop, not quite British, emo or synth pop from the 80s, a little bit of that psychedelic sound, a little garage stuff in there as well, but very cool. And
very nice.
Can't wait for you to hear that one. Now, this next one's a biggie. And before I get into it, I've got to give a little background on why I wanted this other one. This is an album called Space Rangers by Neil Merriweather. And this one was from 1974, I believe. Let me call that up. Yep, 1974. Now, this is not the new edition of my collection. I've actually had this in my collection for several years. This is one of those absolutely unicorn type finds where you find a white label promo, space rock, proggy type thing in an antique store. And I found this in an antique mall store several years ago. Yeah, white label promo on this. Very, very cool. And it was affordable. It wasn't ridiculous. I mean, it wasn't $5, but it also wasn't $50.
Yeah.
So based solely on the cover, I picked this sucker up and just fell in love with it. It is, again, I'm going to call it sci-fi space rock. It's not Rush, but it's got a bit of blues in there. It's infused with some prog rock as well. Again, attracted to this by a cover. There's a cover of Donovan's Sunshine Superman on here. And it's not quite a concept album either, but it's very interesting. So this in mind, I went looking for the rest of Neil Merriweather's discography. And he starts off as a blues artist in a couple of different groups. This guy's from Canada originally, Ottawa, Canada, and moved to Toronto in the mid-60s. And I mean, he has had, I don't want to call hookup, but he has been involved with the likes of Neil Young, Bruce Coburn. He fell in with a lot of that mid-60s folk rock scene in Toronto. And then he kind of tried going off on his own. He went to Britain, he came back and was never really getting success. According to his biography, he was invited to join Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young as a bassist at one point. And he turned it down to kind of work on his other stuff. And so as the 70s come around, he switches gears. He's got a couple of really good blues albums. It was some Charlie Musselwhite he's got on one of his albums. Harvey Mandel is on one of them. Just some real good Brit blues. And then in 74, he absolutely switched gears and went space rock.
Yeah.
So I have been looking and looking and looking for the other companion. There's two of these albums from Neil Merriweather, Space Invaders and then Kryptonite. But because I found the white label promo, the first one, I was, you know how we get missions when we're a collector. I'm on a mission to find the companion white label promo of Kryptonite to go with that first one. And when I couldn't find anything on Discogs that wasn't in the $200 range,
wow,
I opted for, and I just happened to come across two reissues, European reissues. They turned them into a gatefold of each of these albums and reissued them with a bonus 7-inch and a poster and everything in there. So I ordered these things. They weren't cheap. Don't tell Kim. Just because I wanted the matching set. And then lo and behold, on my Discogs want list, I found another white label promo of the original of these.
How about that?
So, and it's very cool. It's got a little insert in here on Kryptonite, but it's a Mercury record. So it's the same label as Rush they were on at that point. But yeah, this is another promotional white label version of Kryptonite. Same thing, just some very guitar centered psych rock, garage rock. You could almost start calling this stuff glam, especially when you look at their outfits. And this one is from 75. So I consider these to be companion albums between Space Rangers and Kryptonite, and in that space rock, glam, hard rock type of genre. So really happy that I got both of them. Let me hold them both up again in case you're looking at. And I can't wait to share these with you guys on the Spotify playlist as well, because I really get a kick out of those two records.
Very nice.
That is very, very fun. So now I think I'm gonna probably move these two reissues along. I think I've got somebody, one of our customers, that's interested in those. So we'll move those on, because as much as I'd like to keep them, I don't really need them, because I did pay a little bit for that white label promo. Not triple digits, but I paid a little bit.
Yeah.
So as always, be sure you check out in the description on our YouTube channel and in the description on the Spotify episode list. We will put a link to the Spotify playlist of all of the stuff that we talked about in our pickups and you can kind of jam with us as you hear these things, provided I can find them all. And as we get through our subject matter today, we'll try to put some of those in the Spotify playlist as well. So make sure you check that out. So onward now to the subject at hand. And I got to admit, Steve, this is going to be, I don't want to call it a tough one, but it was kind of an awakening one for me in looking at my record collection. Now, the idea for this kind of folds off of your last Sunday video. Was it your Sunday or your midweek?
It was the Tuesday one I did. Once in a while, I'll pop in a Tuesday one just for kicks.
Just because. Yeah. Where you looked at some of the female artists in your collection. Mm-hmm. And I think that even you were surprised at the number, really just kind of the ratio of male to female artists in the collection. And that got me looking at mine. And quite frankly, I was shocked at just the absolute lack of the number of, I mean, straight up female artists in my collection.
Yeah.
I'm kind of at a loss.
Yeah. I kind of understand where I'm at with it. I have found now I buy more female artists because they're kind of in the genres that I'm really listening to a lot. And especially when it comes to shoegaze and dream pop. And there's quite a few. So my female artists is increasing. But, you know, what I did on that video was country. And I found that I tend to lean more toward, especially newer, country artists that are female than male. And yeah,
it's kind of an interesting thing, because after I got thinking about this and looking at my collection and the breakdown, which Discogs allows you to break down different ways and look at it, my numbers overall, and we're going to have a little discussion on exactly what makes it a female artist. Are they a fronted group? Are they a solo artist? Is it an all female artist group? But my collection sits right at around 1,400 entries, 1,400 albums. And straight up female only artists in my collection are really under a dozen.
Wow.
That out of the number is it's amazing to me. But now again, that's not saying that there are not female artists as part of other groups. I've got a lot of stuff like that, like a lot of us do. But when I had to sit down and really think, okay, is this straightforward a female artist? How many do I have? And it's not many. Now, I'd like to think, you know, I'm not going to say I'm misogynist. I'm not going to buy female artists. But at the same time, I don't buy records or I don't collect records to meet certain quotas. I get stuff I like to listen to.
Yeah.
And it's just surprising for me to step back and look at this. And it's not dissing any female artists. And there are a lot of very successful female artists out there. It's just that for some reason, I've never really added them into my collection.
Well, you know, as I, you know, thought about, you know, my purchasing, when I was younger, I rarely would buy one because there wasn't a lot of, shall we say, rock. Most of the female artists, especially coming up, where would record companies put them into? The folk, into the soft rock, and they were highly successful, which is why it would happen. You know, Carole King.
Don't forget Motown. You know, Motown and soul Motown. Also.
Yeah, and, you know, for me, a Motown is like a compilation because I like the hits, but I don't want the whole album of it because I'm not going to listen to it. You know, I wasn't into the folk singers. You know, many people love Joni Mitchell.
Oh, yeah.
I fall asleep now, which is not bad. I mean, there's times where you really want to fall asleep and I can pop that on. So when I rebuilt my collection, there was not much that went back. Now I'm going to show some that I do have, but it wasn't where I was really leaning. Yeah, you know, Heart came along and I was excited about Heart. You know, that was part of my 70s. But then when they went really soft and ballady, you know, I fell off of them, you know, the Runaways, you know, something like that. But it's not until I would say the 80s and then forward that I see a lot more females. Some are full female groups. Some are female fronted groups. You know, and you could, you know, say, you know, like you have, you know, I don't know what it is with bass guitar and females. I mean, just like, well, we're going to have a bass. Let's bring in a female. Well, they give them a little bass guitar. Oh, wow, I get that. But it happens all the time. But there's a lot of them. But you know, with fronting bands, there's just some great singers.
Well, there is. And you and I had this discussion ahead of time too. It's like, well, where do we put these female fronted bands? You take something like Pat Benatar or Blondie and say, okay, That's the name of the group. The group has males and a female fronted lead.
Yeah.
Or you take something like the Talking Heads or the Smashing Pumpkins or Sonic Youth, where the group is a different name, led and fronted, the singer, by a male, but very, in some cases, B-52s, for example, they share the vocals a lot.
Yeah, that's a
and
good
something
point.
like that. So I don't really consider those to be a female artist as much as I would just, it's an artist. They're a band, they're a group.
Yeah.
They are there. And now looking back at my collection again, and I'm going to have to say our collection because Kim's got some records in our collection as well. She tends to lean more toward the female artists. She's got actually more country artists like you, like Ashley McBryde. She's a big fan of Ashley McBryde and the like. But she still has a lot of male artists or artists in there as well. A couple of the articles, and I don't want to go too article heavy on this, but Kim actually did find some. Our producer found some stuff for us. This was a study, as reported through Billboard, that leaned on the Billboard Hot 100 charts looking back 10 years. And they looked at the gender of songwriters, producers, and artists of 1,100 popular songs from 2012 through 2022. And the study's key takeaway, according to this, is that women's participation in music creation, which has historically lagged behind male artists or other artists in general, has improved over the past 10 years in several metrics. Now, they said that on the Billboard Hot 100 year-end charts, the percentage of women artists reached 35%, which is a 12-year high, according to the study. And this, they're attributing this to a change that 40-some% of spots in these charts in 2023 last year were occupied by individual women artists. So you start getting the Taylor Swift effect, Beyonce, and several others that just absolutely jacked that up as far as the, not just the female participation in the music industry, but the female charting participation, where they stand on the charts, where they stand on sales. And again, you know, we talk about Taylor Swift from time to time. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan, but there is no denying her impact on music, especially now with numbers like that looking at female artists.
Well, you know, and you know, one of the articles talked about, you know, the collectors, you know, percent of vinyl collectors, female versus male. And I was actually surprised, you know, 56% male, 44% female. I mean, that is substantial. Why? It's, you know, you think of Taylor Swift, you think of Beyonce, the fans are so rabid for that stuff. Now, I don't know how much of the other albums that they buy, but they will go for that. And I mean, you have all kinds of people, you know, I think of Marissa comes in, you know, she likes her rock and everything, but really big female record collectors, they like everything. But there's been a lot of new ones coming in thanks to people like Swift and Beyonce.
Oh, you think that? My wife, Kim, obviously likes collecting records as well. Abby, our friend Abby, brings in a lot of stuff as well. And she's a real hardcore collector looking at stuff. And, you know, I get asked about demographics here at the store. So, well, you probably get a lot of old white guys coming in looking for, yeah, I do. But we also get a lot of female, and they range in age from high school all the way up through middle age to even some retirees coming in. Male, female, it doesn't matter. And I think that the article that you cited that looks at what you said, 54 to 40 something percent.
Yeah, 56 to 44.
56 to 44. I think that that's a fairly accurate representation of what we see here at our store.
It's much better. I mean, to me, that was much better than I would have expected. And I think if you did that 10 years ago, it would have been a whole lot different, because it's always been kind of the male thing, you know what? So you would think it's a male thing, but in all honesty, it's really not.
It's a record collecting thing. And I think I said that earlier. You know, it's not about quotas. I'm not trying to seek out to get X percentage to make sure that I've got female artists in my collection. No, if I like the music, I'll gravitate toward it.
Yeah. Now we have found that the female viewership on our podcast is really lacking, along with my vinyl community. So it's kind of like my channel where, basically it's just a bunch of old white guys watching my channel.
we did look at our Spotify numbers here before we started recording today, and it's interesting. I do know there's some female customers that come in that say that they listen to the podcast. you know, all two of them. Thank you guys very much. So, but yeah, it's predominantly male on that side of things. Artists, let's cover some of the ones in our collection. And this, again, I mentioned it was a little tough for me. I'm going to go way back on this one, and I'm sticking primarily with rock in this case. I do have some jazz. I don't have much country. I don't have much of anything else. The Motown, I think I'm with you. I've got a couple of greatest hits Motowns, and I'm there. Now, this one I find interesting because Grace Slick was part of a group before Jefferson Airplane called the Great Society. And this album, they never released an album per se. So this one is actually called Grace Slick and the Great Society. But because they never released a record after Jefferson Airplane became a little more well-known, this was rehashed by Columbia Records and given the name Grace Slick, when at the time it was just the Great Society. So I don't think we can count this one, can we?
Oh, sure you can. It's it's in your collection. Led by, you're good.
Okay, so and I do enjoy this, and this is actually some early versions of what would become Jefferson Airplane staples. So next up is another one that I'm not certain. She is definitely a solo artist, but at the time, Suzi Quatro, another Michigan artist, by the way, she had a backing band, but she was still the front of this. And this is just some very cool rock. I should also do a shameless self-promotion that I got to interview Suzi Quatro a few years back, and that is on our YouTube channel on Radio Wasteland. And I think we talked a little bit about, you know, her coming of age in that time when it was very, very few female artists coming through that, especially in the Michigan rock scene. But so, yeah, another one that's in my collection, and she is just a great rock and roller, and I think it's very cool to have that in and fronting that.
It was such a rarity to have that female rock and roll. I mean, again, you had the Grace Slick and you had her, but so much went into the softer rock.
Yeah. What about you? You've got a couple to bring up too. I've mine is such a small stack. I don't want to go all at once here.
I actually have a large one, but I have a lot of records. So percentage wise, it's not that great. But, you know, I'll start with Wanda Jackson. And this is from the 50s, from the rockabilly. Now, I used to have a bunch of her originals because you could find the originals in antique stores cheap, but now that doesn't happen. But this does happen. I mean, this gal was, to me, the queen of rockabilly. She did not want to be a rockabilly song, but Elvis Presley talked her into it, so she did like 3-4 albums and then did her true love country music. But by far one of the best. You know, there's a party going on here. Baby Let Me. Yeah, it's just, she's great. She growls. She has this growling voice. Awesome stuff. From the 60s, you know, Aretha Franklin. And most everyone would have. I like her 60s stuff. I don't need a lot of Aretha Franklin. I just need a couple of the albums. I know Sacrilegious or whatever, but you know, this does have Respect, which I absolutely adore. So yeah, nice album from her. A couple others from the 60s real quick. Nancy Sinatra. You know, now she was with Lee Hazelwood on her best albums, in my opinion, but you know, again, greatest hits of her, really does me well. But I mean, what's the 60s without, you know, These Boots Made for Walking? My God, you have to have that one. And great stuff. And one more from the 60s, we have Jane Birkin with Serge Gainsbourg. Now, it was really Serge's thing, but he brought her in, and her vocals, really, when you think of dream pop, you know, where dream pop's at and how it's happened, that gal can coo. And I mean, just some beautiful music came from her voice. And she went on to have a solo career, a successful solo career without Serge. But yeah, great stuff in the 60s.
So no Nico along with your Velvet Underground?
You know, I could have. The first Velvet Underground has Nico, but we all, Nico and me, we don't get along. Me and Yoko and me and Nico. It might be because they have 4 letters, though Jane Birkin has 4 letters too in her name, so I can't use a 4-letter word.
You know, next up in my collection, I think, are just some absolute staples, stuff that is going to be in your collection regardless. And it's not the only Pat Benatar. I think I've got 2 or 3 Pat Benatar albums. It's just some great 80s rock and roll in this case. And then Stevie Nicks on her own with Belladonna. Belladonna is the only Stevie Nicks solo album that I have. I'm not sure why. I just don't have any of the other ones, but I do enjoy this. Which it brings to mind another question. Okay, so if we're talking about female-led groups or female artists, where does Fleetwood Mac fall in that for you? Fleetwood Mac started as a blues rock group out of Britain with nothing but dudes.
True.
And then Christy McVie eventually and Stevie Nicks eventually came in, but they became really the driving force. And I think the more recognizable Fleetwood Mac is because of those two.
Yeah. And a lot of Lindsey Buckingham.
You can't really call Fleetwood Mac a female group in this case. They're a group. They're just a group.
Yeah. I think that you're right. It's a group. Yeah. I had well, the Shocking Blue, again, female led. There for Mariska Veras. This one would be Smith. Yeah. Yep. One of those great, again, took the female voice and put it into punk rock, and CBGBs and everything, and really kind of broke the mold. She had that very androgynous look, and kind of changed again a direction for female, like the Runaways and that. But the Runaways was selling to young teenagers. She was just getting a whole different type of audience out there, and just made some great albums.
Very cool.
Blondie, but it's a group. She's just but you know what? Would this group been around if it wasn't for Blondie? Nope. No. And they'll be the first to admit it. She kind of guys, which is why they're in matching suits. They're in the background. But,
they're subjugated to the back end.
Exactly. So that's kind of my 70s stuff.
Okay. Let me go into the 80s here. Now this one, Vixen. This is an all-girl group. I've got a thought on all-girl groups. As we wrap up today, I want to talk a little bit about that terminology. Right. But this is actually just kind of a more personal thing for me, because my college radio days, I don't know if I shared that story with you, but I got to ride in a limo with all four of these girls before a concert because I was working radio. And it was kind of a memorable. I doubt they remember it, but it was for me. It was very at the height of their popularity. So this one came out in 88. And I think that this was probably 88 when 87, 88 when I got to see them live right around the time that this was out. So that's an interesting one. I'm going to go because all of my stuff next, I jump into the 2000s next. So what else do you have that gets us there?
80s, Grace, late 70s, early 80s, Grace Jones, man, powerhouse. She was amazing. Still is amazing. Scares the hell out of me. If she gets mad, you don't want to be there, man. But she fantastic voice, and she did 4 to me incredible albums. From the late 70s into the 80s, where she went taking it from the disco. It's still dance floor type stuff, but with Robbie Dunbar or Sly Dunbar, it made a big difference. Oh, here we go. This was 70s. My God, Betty Davis. I mean, Betty Davis. Miles Davis's ex-wife. She is the nastiest, funkiest woman on the planet. She has the greatest funk in the world. I mean, and she just growls too. It's just like, rah, and scary. Fantastic music. Really love it. Thinking of the 80s, a fronted band by, Terry Nunn, Berlin. Again, would that group have been there without Terry Nunn? No. I mean, the video world loved Terry Nunn because she was very photogenic, beautiful, still out there, still performing, still doing it.
You think of Missing Persons as well in that vein.
Yes. Very much so. And Cocteau Twins. Again, this, you think of the dream pop beginning and everything. Elizabeth Fraser, and she's gone on and done solo stuff, but her stuff in the 80s with the Cocteau Twins is so interesting, so fun, so atmospheric. It's good, great stuff. And she really began putting, more females began popping into the genre because of her, in my opinion.
Very cool.
Very end of the 90s, beginning Julie Cruz.
Okay.
She put out, again, known for Twin Peaks, dream pop, ethereal type music, following in the vein of Cocteau Twins. Wonderful stuff. Lush, which was huge, especially in Britain. I don't, in the U.S., not as much, but dream pop shoegaze was giant. We had some, but it never really took off until now. Now it's really going. But Mickey Bernie and Bernie, I believe, and Emma Anderson, two of the four members were female. They both were vocalists on there. And they both played guitar. The two males played bass and played drums. So it really was very much a female-fronted band there.
I've got one. I don't have one to show, but a band along that vein that I do have in my collection is Stereolab.
Yeah.
Again, female fronted, but not entirely. There were so many different members on. They had like 12 different synthesizers going at once in Stereolab. But that's, I think, another great example of that.
Yeah.
That's the British child.
Yeah, the 90s. I mean, here's a classic of the 90s. Again, female fronted. Rachel Goswell from a Slow Dive. This is like one of the all-time highest ranked when you think of shoegaze type music. This is it. Female fronted. Just wonderful stuff. It's beautiful music.
So into the 2000s, are we ready for me to go there? Because that's about it for me at this point. I have several albums by blues artist Samantha Fish, and I got to see her play live actually. I think in 2019 here in the Mid-Michigan area, she played at a blues fest, and just some very cool stuff. She's a fantastic slide guitar player. Some of her later albums, and I just have two. I think I've got a total of 4 or 5 albums from Samantha Fish in the collection. But some of her later albums like this, well, Chills and Fever, I think it's probably my all-time favorite because it's got this almost loungy blues feel to it. And she's got some just almost Stevie Ray Vaughan-esque slide guitar rock blues happening. But by the time we get to some of her latter stuff, like Faster, she's edging more toward the poppy. She had a different producer on one of these as well that takes her into almost a more poppy range, but still got some great guitar stuff going. But because I enjoy her work a lot with the earlier stuff, I'm still kind of holding true that she'll get back to that very gritty blues stuff. And that literally takes me into the 2000s, Steve, with the female. I've got another one. Well, can we talk about Wet Leg first then? In 2022.
Oh my God, I forgot to pull that one. Yeah.
Yep. You get Wet Leg in here. And again, this is, I'm going to count this as a female fronted group because, and I forgive me for not remembering their names, but they are essentially the group. And there's 3 other guys in the group as well. But these are the recognizable members. And I wish I remember their names. Probably should have looked that up ahead of time.
It escapes me too right now. I think one's Emma. I can't remember.
Really dig that album. Really dig that album.
Jenny Lewis was for Kyle O'Reilly. She did this with the Watson twins. So there you got 2 female groups. But Jenny Lewis, solo artist, and the Watson twins, wonderful country music. Alt rock, the Beths, brand new. They're out of New Zealand again. Female group there. Wonderful stuff. One of my all-time favorites right now is Blushing Dream Pop Shoegaze. They're out of San Antonio. And it's a couple. It's 2 married couples. It's fronted by the ladies. They both play guitar and do the vocals. Wonderful stuff. You have Los Bitches. This is instrumental, like the Surfagettes. Very similar to that. Beautiful. This just came out a year or so ago. Great music. And real quick, you want Zydeco, Queen Ida out of San Francisco. Great Zydeco music. San Francisco had a large Cajun community, and so she was there and she played Zydeco. Blues, Coco Taylor.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Growls. I just something about female artists and growling. I guess I'm just, hey, they growled. I'm going to buy it. So, but what a voice. Her and Big Mama Thornton, phenomenal. Jazz, Dorothy Ashby. I got it from Vinyl Me Please. It's She plays harp, jazz harp. I have no jazz. I don't even have an Ella Fitzgerald. I used to. And then it's just country, which I did on my one video, but I do have a number of country artists. So yeah, that's a sampling. But
a sampling, but it's a much better sample than what I can pull out of my collection. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
But
well, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm buying more female artists now because I like what they're doing and I like where they're taking the music that I really have been enjoying listening to. So yeah, it's growing.
And I don't know as if I can say that because I'm still basing what I bring into the collection on what I like or what I like at the time.
Yeah.
I happened to hear of Wet Leg, just fell in love with that, the group and the sound, and brought them into the collection. Samantha Fish, really enjoyed her music and her guitar stylings, brought her into the collection. So I don't really see my habits changing in this fashion. And I'm just, again, more shocked though when I broke it down and looked at the numbers that saying, wow, it's just a very, very small percentage. But one thing that I will say, and I'm going to bring this up a little bit, and I see where you fall on this. Throughout the history of rock and roll and female artists in rock and roll, you tend to think of all female groups, not so much the solo artists. The solo artists are an entity of themselves, but doesn't it seem like the all female groups are treated as more of kind of an oddity or a gimmick, if you will, in some cases? So here you have Vixen again, referred to as an all-girl heavy metal band, an all-female heavy metal band or hard rock band. How come you don't say, well, okay, Motley Crue is an all-male hair band?
Yeah.
It's referred to differently. I think, the Suffragettes, as you mentioned, they're an all-female surf rock group. Well, aren't they just a surf rock group that just happens to be all 4 females in there? And I think that's a little unfair in just the way that, I guess, I don't want to say the music industry, but I suppose just society. But I think that has to do with something about just the sheer numbers, especially over the past 50 years, where female artists have been underrepresented in the larger scheme of rock and roll groups. And so when one comes along and there's 4 females, you look, even going back to the Pleasure Seekers with Susie Quattro and her sisters, when they first started, it was more of a novelty. Hey, look at these leather-clad girls all playing instruments all by themselves. How quaint and how cool that they can do this. And it was treated as almost like too much of an oddity. And it almost stuck to where the point where you get a female group, you refer to them as a female group and not as a group. And I think that's not really fair.
And because they were breaking a mold. So to your point, it was an oddity. It wasn't Carole King, it wasn't Helen Reddy, Olivia Newton-John, and all that. More of these softer folk singers. You didn't hear that necessarily as it's a female folk singer versus a male folk singer.
Yep.
I mean, you didn't. I don't think you had. It was just, it's accepted. But now, oh, hey, we got to push this group again. Let's get the young teens and that, put them in leather or whatever. Or in the 80s, they, lingerie and, and just reel them in. Yeah. Yeah. Regretfully, some guys tried that too. And that, boy. Yeah.
They were not dressed like that in the limo. Sadly, I didn't say that. So hopefully,
Prince. He had Sheila E. and all that.
And Apollonia.
It's about
Vanity and Apollonia.
Yep, sex sells.
And that's treated. So, well, hopefully, as we mentioned earlier, that article that talked about the study about the ground being gained and the percentage of female artists, whether they be solo or in groups, increasing. I think that's a good sign. But again, it really comes down to the music for so many of us collectors. Do we like it? Do we want to collect it? You mentioned it yourself. If you like it, you're going to get it.
And the thing that's nice right now is these female artists are doing it their way. It's not the record companies sitting there saying, here's what you got to do. Here's what you got to look like. Here's what it has. The marketing's not there on it. They're just going, no, this is how we're doing it. And I think that gives more power to what they do. And, and again, they're not going for that male teenagers. Yep. They're going for that female audience. And here's what we can do.
And in turn, that is empowering the fans. Again, you look at somebody like Taylor Swift, who is a very strong role model for her younger female fans, showing them that you do not need to be put into this kind of mold. And I think part of her, if you will, the backstory narrative is that she broke out of that male dominated recording industry, and she's doing things the way she wants to do them now. And she's controlling everything in her universe, which is a great thing. But I think in turn that sets a great example for female fans that say, I can be myself as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. Well, that being said, Steve, maybe this wasn't as difficult. I don't know where my collection's going to go, to tell you the truth. Again, I'm not in it for quotas. I'm in it for the music. So we'll see where things take me. And perhaps I've got the female artists. I think I should just sit down with Kim and we'll listen to some Ashley McBryde. And I have. It's good stuff. I do enjoy it. But we'll add it to the collection.
You just got to be in the mood for it.
You do. All right. Well, you folks have been listening to two guys talking about records. Where do you stand on this? Do you have some favorite female artists, and should they just be called some favorite artists who happen to be female? Do you have some all-girl groups that should just be called groups that just happen to have 4 females in there? So I'm with you on that. But let us know in the comments, either on YouTube or connect with us on our Facebook page. Just search for Two Guys Talking About Records, a Vinyl Community podcast. And neither one of us right now are very good at answering comments, are we, Steve? We're working on it. We're working on it. My time here at the store, the summer's slowing down a little bit. Your pool business is hopefully your head's above water.
Yeah.
Oh, see what I did there?
That's very funny. That's very good, though. Well done.
All right. So let us know what you folks think, and we will do our best to get back with you on that. So until next week, Steve, it's been great talking to you. My name's Jim. I own a record store, and I collect records, but I'll work on that percentage.
And I'm Steve, a record collector, and I had more female artists than I expected.
There you go. Have a great week, Steve, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks again.
See you, Jim. Bye.